Millionaire watched his best friend dance with another man, and his heart burned with jealousy. She shouldn't have looked at him like that, but she did. Isabella Reed adjusted the silver bracelet on her wrist for the third time in 5 minutes, her dark eyes scanning the glittering ballroom of the Beverly Hills Hotel. The soft hum of conversation mixed with the gentle clinking of champagne glasses created a symphony she knew by heart, the sound of success. Tonight was her night. The autumn gala she'd spent 6 months orchestrating was finally here, and every detail was perfect. Almost every detail. "You're fidgeting," came a familiar voice behind her, low and warm with just a hint of amusement. Isabella turned, and there he was. Nicholas Hayes stood with his hands casually tucked into the pockets of his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his steel-gray eyes holding that quiet intensity that had made her heart skip since college. At 35, he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from building an empire. His luxury hotel chain had made him one of the youngest billionaires in California. But to her, he was still the guy who brought her coffee during finals week and stayed up all night helping her practice presentations. "I'm not fidgeting," she lied, dropping her hand from the bracelet. "I'm ensuring quality control." Nicholas stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated, just like everything else about him. "Isa, this event is flawless. You could run it blindfolded." The way he said her name, soft and certain, made something flutter in her chest. She'd heard him say it 1,000 times over the past decade, but lately it felt different, heavier, like it carried words he wasn't saying. "Easy for you to say," she replied, smoothing down the emerald silk of her dress, a dress that had taken her 3 weeks to choose, and another week to convince herself she could afford. "You're not the one whose reputation is riding on whether the salmon is perfectly seasoned." "No," he said, his gaze lingering on her face in a way that made her breath catch. "But I'm the one who knows you well enough to see through that calm exterior to the woman who's been surviving on 4 hours of sleep and pure determination." Before Isabella could respond, a hand appeared on her shoulder. She turned to find David Chen. No, she caught herself remembering the forbidden names. David Kingston, one of the event's major sponsors, smiling at her with the kind of warmth that suggested he'd been watching her for a while. "Isabella, you've outdone yourself tonight," David said, his voice carrying the slight accent that revealed his East Coast upbringing. He was handsome in an obvious way, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of smile that graced magazine covers. "I was hoping you might honor me with a dance before the evening gets too busy." Isabella felt Nicholas tense beside her, though his expression remained perfectly neutral. She glanced at him quickly, searching for something in those gray eyes, but found only the same controlled politeness he showed the rest of the world. She began, her heart doing something complicated as she looked between the two men. David's offer was simple, harmless. Nicholas was just her friend, her best friend, but still just a friend, wasn't he? "That sounds lovely," she heard herself say, placing her hand in David's outstretched palm. As David led her toward the dance floor, Isabella caught one last glimpse of Nicholas. For just a moment, so brief she might have imagined it, she saw something raw flash across his features, something that looked almost like... No, she was being ridiculous. The music swelled around them as David pulled her into a confident waltz. He was a good dancer, she realized, letting him guide her through the steps as other couples joined them on the polished marble floor. He smelled like cedar and ambition, and when he smiled down at her, she found herself smiling back. "You know," David murmured as they turned, "I've been wanting to ask you out for months, but Hayes always seems to be around." Isabella's step faltered slightly. "Nicholas, we're friends." "Are you?" David's question was gentle, but there was something knowing in his eyes. "Because the way he looks at you doesn't seem very friendly." Her heart started beating faster, and she found herself searching the crowd for Nicholas. She spotted him near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his attention seemingly focused on his phone. But even from across the room, she could feel the weight of his gaze. When their eyes met, the air between them seemed to shift. Nicholas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and something dark and unreadable crossed his face before he deliberately looked away. "Isabella," David's voice brought her back to the moment. "You okay?" "Yes," she said quickly, forcing her attention back to her dance partner. "Sorry, But when she looked toward the bar again, Nicholas was gone. The song ended, and David kept her hand in his as he led her off the dance floor. "Thank you for the dance," he said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I hope it won't be the last." Isabella managed another smile, but her mind was elsewhere, scanning the ballroom for a familiar figure in a black tuxedo. Where had Nicholas gone, and why did his sudden disappearance make her chest feel hollow? "Excuse me," she murmured to David, already stepping away. "I need to check on something." She found Nicholas's assistant Claire near the dessert table. "Have you seen Nicholas?" Isabella asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Claire looked surprised. "He left about 10 minutes ago. Said he had an early morning and needed to call it a night." Left, without saying goodbye. Nicholas had never, in 10 years of friendship, left an event without finding her first. Even when he was traveling for business, even when they'd had their rare disagreements, he always made sure to say goodbye. Isabella's phone buzzed with a text message. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. "Great event, Isa. You were perfect tonight." She stared at the message, reading it over and over, searching for hidden meaning in the careful words. There was something wrong. Something had shifted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed the moment she'd taken David's hand. As the gala continued around her, filled with laughter and congratulations and the sweet taste of professional triumph, Isabella felt a cold certainty settling in her stomach. She had lost something tonight, something precious and irreplaceable, and she had no idea how to get it back. Would you have made the same choice? What would you have done in her place? 3 days of silence felt like 3 years. Isabella stared at her phone for the 100th time that morning, her thumb hovering over Nicholas's contact. The screen showed their last exchange, his cryptic goodbye text from the gala night, followed by her unanswered response asking if everything was okay. The little read notification mocked her from beneath her message. He'd read it. He just hadn't replied. "Earth to Isabella," came Mia's voice from across the small cafe table. Her best friend, well, her best female friend, waved a perfectly manicured hand in front of Isabella's face. "You've been stirring that latte for 5 minutes. Unless you're trying to create a coffee tornado, I think it's mixed." Isabella set down her spoon with a clink that seemed too loud in the cozy Beverly Hills cafe. Outside, palm trees swayed in the October breeze, and the afternoon sun painted everything in that golden California light that usually made her feel hopeful. Today, it just felt distant. "Sorry," she murmured, finally looking up at Mia's concerned brown eyes. "I'm just obsessing over why Nicholas ghosted you after the gala," Mia finished, her perfectly arched eyebrow rising. "Because that's what you've been doing since you called me at 6 a.m. yesterday, panic rambling about mixed signals and disappeared best friends." Isabella winced. Had she really called that early? The past few days felt like a blur of checking her phone, overanalyzing that last text, and trying to convince herself that Nicholas's sudden distance didn't matter as much as it clearly did. "He didn't ghost me," Isabella protested weakly. "He's probably just busy with work. You know how he gets when he's expanding into new markets." Mia leaned back in her chair, her expression switching to the no-nonsense look she'd perfected during her years as a family therapist. "And when was the last time Nicholas Hayes was too busy for you?" "I'll wait." Isabella opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because Mia was right. In 10 years of friendship, Nicholas had never gone more than a day without some form of contact. Even during his busiest acquisition deals, even when he was traveling across time zones, he always found a way to check in. A text about something silly he'd seen that reminded him of her. A photo of terrible hotel coffee with a message about how she'd ruined him for anything that wasn't her perfectly calibrated brew. A random call just to hear her voice after a long day. The silence wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. "Maybe I said something wrong," Isabella whispered, more to herself than to Mia. "Or maybe he's upset about the David situation." "What David situation?" Mia's eyes sharpened with interest. "You mean tall, handsome, sponsor guy who kept looking at you like you were the last piece of chocolate cake?" Heat crept up Isabella's neck. "It was just a dance, a harmless dance." "Isabella," Mia's voice went gentle but firm. "Honey, look at me." Reluctantly, Isabella met her friend's gaze. "How long are you going to keep pretending you don't see what everyone else sees?" "I don't know what you mean." The way Nicholas looks at you, the way you light up when he walks into a room, the fact that you've both been tiptoeing around something for years and calling it friendship. Isabella's heart started that familiar racing rhythm it did whenever someone got too close to the truth she'd been hiding from herself. Nicholas and I are friends. Good friends. Best friends. That's all. Is it? Mia challenged. Because the way you've been falling apart for 3 days suggests otherwise. Before Isabella could respond, her phone buzzed against the marble table. Both women looked down at the screen, and Isabella's breath caught. Nicholas Hayes. Her hands trembled slightly as she swiped to open the message. Can we talk? I'll pick you up at 7. N. The simple words sent her heart into overdrive. She read them twice, 3 times, searching for tone in the sparse text. Was he angry? Hurt? Ready to explain why he'd been avoiding her? Well? Mia prompted, clearly reading over Isabella's shoulder. What are you going to say? Isabella's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to make him wait, the way he'd made her wait. Part of her wanted to demand an explanation for the past 3 days of torture, but a bigger part, the part that had been aching since the moment she realized he'd left the gala without saying goodbye, just wanted to see him again. Okay, I'll be ready. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came immediately. Thank you. 2 words that somehow carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. Isabella, Mia said softly, reaching across the table to cover her friend's hand. Whatever happens tonight, whatever this conversation brings up, just remember that some friendships are too strong to break, but maybe, just maybe, they're strong enough to become something more. Isabella squeezed Mia's hand, grateful for the support even as her stomach churned with nervous energy. What if I'm reading this all wrong? What if he just wants to talk about business? Or he's planning another trip? Or what if he doesn't? Mia interrupted gently. What if this is exactly what it feels like? As Isabella walked back to her apartment later that afternoon, Mia's words echoed in her mind. The October air carried the scent of jasmine from someone's garden, and the familiar sounds of LA traffic created a backdrop she usually found comforting. Today, everything felt charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. She spent 2 hours getting ready, showering, doing her hair in loose waves that framed her face, choosing a simple but elegant black dress that Nicholas had once complimented. She applied her makeup carefully, focusing on making her dark eyes pop, then immediately worried she was trying too hard. By 6:45, she was pacing her living room, checking her reflection in every mirror she passed. The apartment felt too small, too warm, despite the air conditioning humming quietly in the background. At exactly 7 p.m., a soft knock echoed through her door. Isabella took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one final time, and walked to the door. Her hand hesitated on the handle for just a moment, because somehow she knew that whatever was waiting on the other side was going to change everything. She opened the door, and there was Nicholas. He looked tired, she realized immediately. There were subtle lines around his eyes she hadn't noticed before, and his usually perfect hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He was dressed more casually than usual, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his grey eyes look almost silver. "Hi," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her chest tighten. "Hi," she whispered back. They stood there for a moment, 10 years of friendship and 3 days of silence stretching between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Finally, Nicholas spoke, his voice rougher than usual. "We need to talk, Isa, because I can't keep pretending anymore." And in that moment, she realized what she had been afraid to admit for years. Neither could she. She wasn't ready for this conversation, but it was happening anyway. Nicholas's car smelled like leather and the faint trace of his cologne, a combination that had always felt like safety to Isabella. Tonight it felt like walking into a storm. He drove in silence through the winding roads of the Hollywood Hills, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unusual tension, his jaw set in a way that told her he was fighting some internal battle. Isabella stole glances at his profile as the city lights blurred past her window. She'd memorized that face over the years, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell slightly over his forehead when he was deep in thought, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident he'd told her about during one of their late-night college conversations. But tonight there was something different about him, something raw and unguarded that made her pulse quicken. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption," he replied, his voice carrying that controlled tone she'd learned, meant he was feeling anything but controlled. They pulled into the empty parking lot of Griffith Observatory, the iconic building dark against the night sky. Los Angeles sprawled below them like a carpet of diamonds, beautiful and endless. Nicholas had brought her here before, late-night drives when they were younger, times when the world felt too heavy and they needed perspective. But this felt different, more intimate, more dangerous. He turned off the engine and suddenly the silence was deafening. Isabella could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing against her chest, like a physical force. "Nicholas," she began, but he held up a hand. "Let me go first," he said, turning in his seat to face her fully. In the dim light from the dashboard, his grey eyes looked almost black. "Because if I don't say this now, I might lose my nerve again." Isabella's breath caught. "Again?" A bitter smile crossed his features. "You think the other night was the first time I wanted to tell you how I feel. Isa, I've been fighting this for years. Years of watching you date other people. Years of pretending I was fine being the friend you called when they broke your heart. Years of telling myself that what we had was enough." Her world tilted slightly. "What are you saying?" Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, messing it further. "I'm saying that watching you dance with someone else was a wake-up call I should have had a long time ago. I'm saying that seeing his hands on your waist, seeing you smile at him the way you—" He stopped, his voice breaking slightly. "It nearly killed me, Isabella." The confession hung between them like a live wire. Isabella felt like she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this man she thought she knew completely, and realized she'd been blind to the most important thing about him. "You were jealous," she whispered, the words falling from her lips before she could stop them. "Jealous?" Nicholas let out a harsh laugh. "That doesn't even begin to cover it. I was drowning, Isa, sitting there watching you in his arms, and all I could think was that I'd wasted 10 years being a coward." Isabella's hands were shaking now. "Nicholas, I know this changes everything," he continued, his voice raw with emotion. "I know I'm probably destroying the best thing in my life by telling you this, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't watch you move on with someone else and smile and nod and act like it doesn't tear me apart." Tears burned at the back of Isabella's eyes. 10 years of friendship, 10 years of wondering, 10 years of telling herself she was imagining the way he looked at her sometimes, the way he held her a little too long when they hugged, the way he remembered every small detail about her life, like it mattered more than anything else in the world. "You're an idiot," she said softly. Nicholas's face fell. "Isa, you're an idiot," she repeated, reaching over to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Because you think you've been hiding this from me. You think I haven't noticed the way you look at me, when you think I'm not paying attention. You think I haven't wondered why you've never had a serious relationship, why you always find excuses to spend time with me, why you know my coffee order better than I do." Nicholas went very still under her touch. "What are you saying?" Isabella's heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. "I'm saying that I've been in love with you since senior year of college, and I've spent the last 8 years trying to convince myself it was just friendship." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Nicholas stared at her like he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. 8 years, he whispered. 8 years of telling myself we were better as friends. 8 years of dating other people and trying to forget how I felt about you. 8 years of wondering what would happen if I was brave enough to tell you the truth." Nicholas's hand came up to cover hers, where it rested against his cheek. His skin was warm, and she could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. "Why didn't you?" he asked. "Same reason you didn't," she admitted. "Because losing you as a friend would have been worse than never having you as anything more." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their confessions settling around them like snow. Los Angeles glittered below, indifferent to the way their entire world had just shifted on its axis. "So what now?" Nicholas asked, his voice barely audible. Isabella looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd been her anchor for a decade, who'd celebrated every success and helped her through every failure, who'd somehow managed to become the standard by which she measured everyone else, without her even realizing it. "Now," she said, moving closer to him in the confined space of the car, "we stop being cowards." Nicholas's breath hitched as she leaned toward him. She could see the exact moment he stopped thinking and started feeling, the exact moment 10 years of careful control crumbled. "Isa," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. "Kiss me," she whispered back. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Nicholas's hand slid into her hair, gentle but sure, and he pulled her closer. When their lips met, it was like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid this moment might shatter like glass. Then deeper, more certain, as if they were trying to make up for years of wanting in a single touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I've loved you for so long I forgot what it felt like not to." Isabella's heart soared and broke, and mended itself all at once. "I love you too." But even as she said the words, even as she felt the rightness of them settle into her bones, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. This was just the beginning. Love, real love, was never just about the confession. It was about everything that came after. Some mornings change everything, and this was one of them. Isabella woke up to the scent of coffee and something that smelled suspiciously like pancakes. For a moment she lay still in her bed, eyes closed, wondering if she was dreaming. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The conversation, the confessions, the kiss that had lasted until the observatory's security lights came on. Nicholas. Her eyes flew open, and she found herself staring at an empty pillow beside her. They'd been careful. After the kiss, after the tears and laughter and more kisses, he'd driven her home and walked her to her door like the gentleman he'd always been. But he'd also kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that had made her knees weak, promising to see her in the morning. Apparently he'd kept that promise. Isabella padded to her kitchen in her silk pajamas and fuzzy slippers, her heart doing something complicated as she took in the scene before her. Nicholas stood at her stove, his back to her, wearing the same jeans from last night and what looked like one of her oversized UCLA sweatshirts, something he must have borrowed from her closet. His dark hair was mussed, and there was something so domestic, so right about seeing him in her space like this. "You raided my closet," she said softly, not wanting to startle him, but unable to keep the smile out of her voice. He turned, and the expression on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. There was wonder there and relief, and something so tender it made her chest ache. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, setting down the spatula and moving toward her. "I hope you don't mind. I went home to shower and change, but I may have grabbed the wrong sweatshirt on my way out." "Liar," she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. "You know exactly whose sweatshirt that is. You bought it for me sophomore year when I complained about being cold in the library." Nicholas's smile was soft and a little sheepish. "Maybe I wanted to see how it would feel to wear something that smells like you." The honesty in his voice made her heart flutter. This was new territory for both of them. This tenderness, this openness, this feeling of being allowed to want each other without hiding it. "How long have you been here?" she asked, wrapping her arms around his waist and marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "About an hour. I couldn't sleep." His hands found her hair, fingers threading through the dark waves. "I kept thinking I'd dreamed the whole thing." "Did you?" she whispered against his chest. "Dream it?" Nicholas pulled back to look at her, his grey eyes serious. "No, but I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize you made a mistake." Isabella felt her heart squeeze at the vulnerability in his voice. This was Nicholas without his walls, without the careful control he showed the world. This was the man who'd loved her in silence for years, who was still half convinced he didn't deserve this happiness. "Nicholas," she said firmly, cupping his face in her hands, "look at me." He did, though she could see the fear lurking in his expression. "I didn't make a mistake. The only mistake I made was waiting 8 years to tell you how I feel." She pressed a soft kiss to his lips. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, Hayes." The relief that washed over his features was so profound it made her chest ache. He kissed her then, deep and grateful, and she could taste the promise in it. "Good," he murmured against her lips, "because I made you pancakes, and I was really hoping you'd stick around to eat them." Isabella laughed, the sound bright and free. You made me pancakes? I made you pancakes, he confirmed, leading her toward the stove where a stack of golden pancakes waited on a plate. With blueberries, and I may have gone a little overboard with the coffee situation. She looked over at her counter and had to stifle another laugh. He'd clearly gone to the market early. There were bags from 3 different coffee shops, a variety of pastries, fresh fruit, orange juice, and what looked like enough food for a small army. Nicholas, she said, trying to sound stern but failing miserably, this is enough food for 10 people. I wasn't sure what you'd want, he said, looking almost embarrassed. And I wanted this morning to be perfect. I wanted you to have everything you could possibly want. The sweetness of it, the care behind the gesture made tears prick at her eyes. You know what I want? What? Coffee and pancakes with the man I love. Everything else is just bonus. Nicholas went very still at her casual use of the word love, like he was still getting used to hearing it in daylight, without the cover of darkness and confession. Say it again, he said quietly. What? Say you love me again. I need to hear it when I can see your face. Isabella's heart melted completely. She reached up to touch his cheek, marveling at how different this felt from every other morning of her life. I love you, Nicholas Hayes, she said clearly, watching the way his eyes lit up at the words. I love your terrible morning hair and the way you bought half of Beverly Hills because you wanted to make me breakfast. I love that you remember how I like my coffee, and that you're wearing my sweatshirt because you missed me after 3 hours apart. I did miss you, he admitted. Is that crazy? We've been apart for longer than that thousands of times, but last night, after I dropped you off, it felt wrong, like I was leaving part of myself behind. Not crazy, Isabella assured him, going up on her toes to kiss him again. Perfect. They ate breakfast at her small kitchen table, their knees bumping together, stealing kisses between bites of pancakes and sips of perfectly brewed coffee. It should have felt awkward, this new intimacy, but instead it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I should probably warn you, Nicholas said as they finished eating. I have no idea how to do this. Do what? Be your boyfriend. The words sounded strange coming from him, and he laughed softly. God, that sounds weird. I'm 35 years old and I feel like I'm 16. Isabella reached across the table to take his hand. We'll figure it out. We have time. Do we? There was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. Isa, people are going to have opinions about this, about us. My family, your friends, the business world, everyone's going to have something to say about Nicholas Hayes dating his best friend. The reality of what he was saying hit her like a cold wave. She'd been so caught up in the euphoria of finally being with him that she hadn't thought about the outside world, about the scrutiny that came with loving someone whose life was lived in the public eye. Are you having second thoughts? She asked quietly. No. His answer was immediate and firm. Never. But I need you to know what you're signing up for. I need you to be sure. Isabella looked at him, at this man who'd brought her breakfast and worried about her comfort, and was already trying to protect her from things that hadn't even happened yet. This man who'd loved her in secret for years and was now brave enough to love her in the light. I'm sure, she said simply. Are you? Nicholas brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But even as they smiled at each other across her kitchen table, even as the morning sun painted everything golden and perfect, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before the storm, because Nicholas was right. The world was going to have opinions, and not all of them were going to be kind. The photograph was everywhere, and it changed everything. Isabella stared at her phone screen in the crowded Starbucks, her coffee growing cold as she scrolled through the gossip blog that Mia had frantically texted her about. There it was, a crystal-clear image of her and Nicholas from 3 nights ago, taken as they left a small Italian restaurant in West Hollywood. His hand was on her lower back, her head tilted toward him as they laughed at something he'd whispered. They looked happy, in love, completely oblivious to the photographer lurking in the shadows. Billionaire Hotel Herr Nicholas Hayes spotted with mystery woman, read the headline in bold, accusatory letters. Who is the beautiful brunette who's captured the heart of LA's most eligible bachelor? Isabella's stomach dropped as she read further. They'd identified her within hours. Isabella Reed, 27, event planner and longtime friend of Hayes. The article speculated about their relationship, about how long they'd been secretly dating, about whether this was a whirlwind romance or something that had been brewing behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Nicholas, have you seen it?" His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "I'm looking at it now," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one in the coffee shop was paying attention to her conversation. How did they even know we were there? Someone must have tipped them off, or they've been following me. The frustration in his voice was palpable. "Isa, I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have—" "Nicholas, stop." Isabella stood up, gathering her things. "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it?" His laugh was bitter. "I knew this would happen. I knew the moment we went public, the vultures would circle." Isabella pushed through the coffee shop door onto the busy sidewalk, her mind racing. In the 3 weeks since they'd officially become a couple, they'd been careful, or so she'd thought. Quiet dinners, movie nights at her apartment, walks in less crowded parts of the city. She'd almost convinced herself they could have a normal relationship, that his wealth and status wouldn't matter. How naive she'd been. "Where are you?" Nicholas asked. "Walking to my office. I have a client meeting in 20 minutes. Cancel it. Come to my place. We need to talk about how we're going to handle this." Isabella paused at a crosswalk, watching the chaos of LA traffic while trying to process the chaos in her own life. "Handle what?" "Nicholas, we're two adults in a relationship. We don't owe anyone an explanation." "You don't understand," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning. By tonight, there will be photographers outside your apartment, your office. They'll dig into your past, your family, your college years. They'll find people who knew you and pay them to share stories, real or made up." The light changed, but Isabella didn't move. "You're scaring me. I'm trying to prepare you. This is my world, Isa. This is what comes with being with me." As if summoned by his words, Isabella noticed a man with a large camera across the street, his lens pointed in her direction. Her blood ran cold. "Nicholas," she whispered into the phone. "I think there's already someone watching me." She heard him curse under his breath. "Where exactly are you?" "Corner of Wilshire and—" "Don't move. I'm sending security." "Security?" Isabella's voice pitched higher. "Nicholas, I don't need—" "Yes, you do." His tone brooked no argument. "This is what I was trying to tell you. From now on, your life isn't going to be private anymore. Every move you make, every person you talk to, everything you wear, it's all going to be analyzed and critiqued and splashed across gossip sites." Isabella felt like she couldn't breathe. The photographer was definitely watching her now, and she could see at least 2 other people with cameras joining him. How had this happened so fast? "I can't do this," she whispered. "What?" "I can't live like this, Nicholas. I can't have strangers following me around, taking pictures, writing stories about my life." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "So what are you saying?" Nicholas's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. "I don't know." Isabella closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten. I didn't think it would be like this." "The car will be there in 2 minutes," Nicholas said quietly. "Please get in it. Come to my house. Let's figure this out together." Isabella opened her eyes and looked at the growing crowd of photographers across the street. This morning, she'd been just another person grabbing coffee before work. Now she was a target, a story, a source of entertainment for strangers on the internet. "Okay," she said finally. "But Nicholas, we need to have a serious conversation about whether this is sustainable." She heard his sharp intake of breath. "Are you breaking up with me?" "I don't know," she admitted, hating how the words sounded but unable to take them back. "I need to think." The line went quiet for so long, she thought he'd hung up. "Nicholas, I'm here." His voice was hollow. The car's pulling up now, black sedan. Isabella saw it, sleek, expensive, with tinted windows that would hide her from the cameras. She felt like she was surrendering something fundamental as she walked toward it. "Isa." Nicholas's voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. "Yeah? I love you. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I love you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she slipped into the back seat of the car. "I love you too. That's what makes this so hard." As the car pulled away from the curb, Isabella watched the photographers through the tinted glass. They were already on their phones, probably calling their editors, already spinning the story of how Nicholas Hayes's girlfriend had run away from them. She'd wanted a fairy tale romance. Instead, she was learning that loving a prince meant living in a fishbowl, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough for that kind of love. 20 minutes later, she stood in Nicholas's enormous Malibu living room, feeling small and overwhelmed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Pacific Ocean. He was pacing, his hair messed from running his hands through it, his usual composure completely shattered. "Talk to me," he said without looking at her. "Tell me what you're thinking." Isabella sank onto his white leather couch, pulling her knees to her chest. "I'm thinking that 3 weeks ago, my biggest worry was whether the catering would be on time for the Johnson wedding. Now I'm thinking about security details and media statements, and whether my mother is going to see pictures of me on gossip blogs." Nicholas stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Your mother doesn't read gossip blogs." "She will now." Isabella's laugh was shaky. "Everyone will now. My whole life is going to be dissected by strangers who think they have a right to know everything about me because I fell in love with you." The words hung between them like a chasm. "So you regret it?" Nicholas asked quietly. "Falling in love with me?" Isabella looked at him, at this man who'd been her best friend for 10 years, who'd held her while she cried over other men, who'd celebrated every success and helped her through every failure, who'd loved her patiently and completely, and was now watching her with naked fear in his eyes. "No," she whispered. "I regret that loving you comes with a price I'm not sure I can pay." Nicholas walked over and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Then let me pay it," he said urgently. "Let me hire security, let me handle the media, let me protect you from all of this." "But that's not a solution, Nicholas. That's just expensive damage control." "Then what do you want me to do?" His voice cracked slightly. "Tell me how to fix this." Isabella looked into his grey eyes and saw her own heartbreak reflected there. Because the truth was, she didn't know if this could be fixed. Some problems, she was learning, couldn't be solved with love alone. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to think about whether I'm strong enough for this life." Nicholas's face went pale, but he nodded. "How much time?" "I don't know." He pressed his forehead against their joined hands. "Don't give up on us, Isa, please." "I'm not giving up," she said, though the words felt hollow. I need to figure out if there's an us that can survive this." But as she said it, she wondered if she was lying to both of them, because for the first time since they'd confessed their love, Isabella wasn't sure love was going to be enough. Distance, Isabella discovered, was more than just physical space. For 5 days, she'd been staying at Mia's apartment in Santa Monica, hiding from photographers and trying to make sense of her life. 5 days of declined calls from Nicholas, of watching entertainment news that dissected their relationship like a medical procedure, of seeing her own face staring back at her from magazine covers in grocery store checkout lines. Who is Isabella Reed? From friendship to romance. The Nicholas Hayes love story. Is she after his money? The headlines got more invasive each day. Isabella sat cross-legged on Mia's couch, laptop balanced on her knees, staring at an email from her biggest client. The Weatherby Foundation wanted to reassess their partnership given the recent media attention. Translation: they were firing her because dating Nicholas Hayes made her too controversial for their conservative donor base. "That's the 3rd one this week," Mia said gently, setting down a cup of tea beside Isabella. Her friend's usually perfect hair was in a messy bun, and there were dark circles under her eyes, signs that she'd been fielding phone calls from reporters trying to get quotes about Isabella. "I know." Isabella closed the laptop with more force than necessary. "Apparently falling in love makes me unemployable." "It's not falling in love that's the problem," Mia said carefully. "It's who you fell in love with." Isabella looked at her best friend, seeing the concern there, the way Mia was trying to be supportive while also being realistic about the situation. "You think I should end it?" Isabella said. It wasn't a question. Mia was quiet for a long moment. "I think you need to decide what kind of life you want, and whether that life is compatible with being Nicholas Hayes's girlfriend." Before Isabella could respond, her phone rang. Not Nicholas. She'd stopped answering his calls after the 2nd day, unable to bear the pain in his voice. This was her mother. "Hi, Mom," Isabella answered, trying to inject some lightness into her voice. "Baby girl," came her mother's warm voice, tinged with worry. "I just saw the news. Are you okay?" Isabella closed her eyes, feeling like a teenager who'd been caught sneaking out. "I'm fine, Mom. It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" "You're in love with Nicholas. You've been in love with Nicholas since college. I don't see what's complicated about that." Trust her mother to cut through the noise and focus on what mattered. Dr. Angela Reed had always been able to see through Isabella's defenses with surgical precision. "It's not that simple," Isabella said. "There are photographers, Mum. People writing horrible things about me online. I lost 3 clients this week just for dating him." "And?" Isabella blinked. "And what? And is Nicholas worth it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Isabella thought about Nicholas, about the way he'd held her while she cried last week, about how he'd tried to shield her from the worst of the media attention, about the dozen flower deliveries and handwritten notes he'd sent to Mia's apartment. "I know you need space, but I need you to know I'm not giving up on us. N. Saw your favorite coffee shop on my way to work today. Made me think of Sunday mornings with you. N. I miss your laugh. I miss everything. N. I don't know," Isabella whispered. "Well," her mother said pragmatically, "that sounds like something you need to figure out. But Isabella, don't let fear make the decision for you. You've spent your whole life playing it safe. Maybe it's time to take a risk on something that matters." After her mother hung up, Isabella sat in the gathering darkness of Mia's living room, thinking about risk and safety, and the space between hearts. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Nicholas, I know you don't want to talk, but please read this. There's something you need to know." A link followed. Isabella hesitated, then clicked it. It was a video of Nicholas at what looked like a press conference. The timestamp showed it was from earlier that day. Isabella's heart began to race as she watched him step up to a podium, looking tired but determined. "I've called this press conference," Nicholas began, his voice clear and steady, "to address the recent media speculation about my personal life." Isabella's breath caught. What was he doing? "Over the past week, I've watched the woman I love become the target of invasive coverage and malicious speculation. I've watched her privacy be violated, her character questioned, and her professional reputation attacked. And I realize that my silence has been interpreted as permission for this behavior." Nicholas looked directly into the camera, and Isabella felt like he was speaking directly to her. "Isabella Reed is the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. She's brilliant, kind, and strong enough to put up with me for 10 years of friendship before I was brave enough to tell her how I felt. She doesn't deserve to be treated like a commodity or a scandal. She deserves respect." Isabella's eyes filled with tears as Nicholas continued. "So let me be crystal clear. Isabella didn't seek the spotlight. She didn't ask for this attention. She simply had the misfortune of falling in love with someone whose life comes with unwanted scrutiny. And if you want to write stories about us, if you want to speculate about our relationship, then here are the facts. I love her. I've loved her for years, and I plan to love her for the rest of my life, regardless of what any of you think about it." Nicholas paused, his jaw tightening with emotion. "But I also want to say this directly to Isabella, because I know she's watching. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I'm sorry my world crashed into yours without warning. And I'm sorry if loving me has caused you more pain than joy." Isabella was crying now, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "You asked for time to think, and I'm giving you that time. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes, because some things, some people, are worth waiting for." The video ended, and Isabella sat in stunned silence. Mia appeared beside her, having obviously watched over her shoulder. "Well," Mia said softly, "that's how you fight for someone." Isabella's phone immediately started ringing. Reporters, probably, wanting her reaction to Nicholas's very public declaration. She ignored it, instead scrolling through the comments under the video. Most were supportive, surprisingly. People calling Nicholas's statement romantic and brave, others defending Isabella against the more vicious coverage. It wasn't universal. There were still cruel comments, still people questioning her motives, but it was better than she'd expected. "He just put himself out there completely," Isabella said quietly. "He could have stayed silent, let this blow over. Instead, he defended me in front of the entire world." "He loves you," Mia said simply. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Isabella looked at her phone, at the dozen missed calls from Nicholas, at the messages she'd been too scared to answer. She thought about her mother's words about taking risks, about Nicholas's face in that video when he'd said he'd wait as long as it took. She thought about a life without him, safe, private, but empty of the man who'd been her anchor for 10 years. And she thought about a life with him, Complicated, public, but full of a love that was worth fighting for. "I need to see him," she said suddenly, standing up from the couch. "Now?" Mia checked her watch. "It's almost midnight." "Now," Isabella confirmed, grabbing her keys. "Some conversations can't wait for morning." As she drove through the empty streets toward Nicholas's house, Isabella realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Love wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be worth it. And Nicholas Hayes, complicated life, media attention and all, was worth everything. Now she just had to hope she wasn't too late to tell him. Some distances can only be crossed by running. And Isabella was finally ready to run. Nicholas's Malibu house sat dark against the midnight sky, the only light coming from the floor-to-ceiling windows of his living room. Isabella could see him through the glass as she pulled into his driveway, sitting on his white leather couch, head in his hands, looking like a man who'd lost everything that mattered. Her heart clenched at the sight. This was what her silence had done to him. This was the cost of her fear. Isabella sat in her car for a moment, gathering courage. Through the window she could see the ocean waves crashing against the shore below, relentless and powerful. Like love, she thought. Like the feeling that had brought her here, despite every rational reason to stay away. She got out of the car slowly, her heels clicking against the stone driveway. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. As she approached the front door, she could see Nicholas more clearly through the window. He was still wearing the same dark suit from the press conference, but his tie was gone, his shirt partially unbuttoned, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. Before she could lose her nerve, Isabella rang the doorbell. The effect was immediate. Nicholas's head snapped up, his body going rigid with attention. For a moment he didn't move, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. Then he was on his feet, crossing the room in quick strides. The door opened, and there he was. Up close she could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, the stubble that suggested he hadn't been taking care of himself, the hollow look of someone who'd been holding his breath for 5 days. "Isa," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. "Hi," she said softly, suddenly feeling shy. "I saw your press conference." Nicholas's expression was carefully guarded, as if he was afraid to hope. And, instead of answering with words, Isabella stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his chest. She felt his sharp intake of breath, felt the way his whole body seemed to melt with relief, felt his arms come around her like he was trying to memorize the feeling of holding her. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shirt. "I'm so sorry I ran." Nicholas's hand found her hair, fingers threading through the dark waves. "Don't apologize. You needed time. You needed space, I understand." Isabella pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. "No, you don't understand. I didn't just need space, I was scared. I was terrified of what loving you would cost me, and I let that fear make me a coward." "You're not a coward," Nicholas said firmly. "You're human. This situation, that is not normal. It's not fair to ask someone to deal with this level of scrutiny just for loving me." "But that's exactly what you did in that press conference," Isabella said, her voice growing stronger. "You stood up in front of the world and said I was worth it. You put yourself on the line for me, for us. And what did I do? I hid." Nicholas cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had started falling. "You're here now. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Isabella searched his eyes. "Nicholas, I lost 3 clients this week. There are photographers following my mother to her book club. Someone found my college roommate and paid her to give an interview about my dating history." "I know," he said quietly. "I tried to have my legal team shut down the worst of it, but—" "Stop," Isabella interrupted. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't protect me from all of this. Your legal team, your security, your money, none of that can give me a normal life." Nicholas's face fell, and she could see him preparing for the blow he thought was coming. "But," Isabella continued, watching hope flicker back to life in his gray eyes, "maybe I don't want a normal life. Maybe I want a life with you, complicated and messy and public as it might be." Nicholas went very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I spent 5 days trying to imagine my life without you, and you know what I realized?" Isabella smiled through her tears. "I'd rather be miserable in the spotlight with you than happy in the shadows without you." The sound Nicholas made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Isa, I'm saying that watching you defend me, defend us, made me realize something important. You didn't ask me to change who I am to fit into your world. You asked your world to make room for me. And if you're brave enough to fight for us publicly, then I need to be brave enough to fight for us privately. Nicholas kissed her then, desperate and grateful and full of 5 days' worth of missed touches. Isabella kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all of her apologies and promises into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I love you, and I know this won't be easy, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make it worth it. I love you too, Isabella replied. And I promise I won't run again, no matter how scary it gets, no matter how many photographers or gossip columns or lost clients. I'm in this. We're in this together. Nicholas led her into the living room, where she could see the evidence of his sleepless nights. Empty coffee cups, his laptop open to news articles about their relationship, scattered papers that looked like legal documents. You've been working on damage control, she observed. I've been working on protection, Nicholas corrected. Legal ways to limit the harassment, security measures to keep you safe, PR strategies to shift the narrative away from speculation towards something more positive. Isabella felt her heart swell at the care behind his efforts. And what does a positive narrative look like? Nicholas smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since she'd arrived. The truth, that we're two people who found love in friendship, that we're happy. That anyone who wants to tear that down is fighting a losing battle, because what we have is stronger than their worst intentions. You make it sound simple, Isabella said, curling up beside him on the couch. It is simple, Nicholas replied, pulling her closer. The love part is simple. Everything else is just noise. Isabella nestled into his side, feeling truly at peace for the first time in days. So what happens now? Now we do this together. We face whatever comes next as a team. And we don't let anyone else's opinion of our relationship matter more than our own. Isabella looked up at him. This man who'd waited for her even when she'd given him no reason to hope, who'd fought for them when she'd been too scared to fight for herself. I have a request, she said. Anything. The next time we go to dinner, can we go somewhere with terrible lighting and no windows? Somewhere paparazzi would never think to look? Nicholas laughed, the sound rich and warm and full of relief. I know just the place. Best tacos in LA, plastic chairs and lighting that would make a supermodel look bad. Perfect, Isabella said, settling more comfortably against him. It's a date. Outside, the waves continued their endless rhythm against the shore. Inside, two hearts that had been apart found their way back to each other, stronger for having survived the storm. The photographers would still be there tomorrow. The gossip columns would still speculate. The scrutiny wouldn't magically disappear. But Isabella had learned something important during their separation. Love wasn't about avoiding the storm. It was about finding someone worth weathering it with. And Nicholas Hayes was worth every storm that was coming their way. Love, Isabella discovered, was braver when it had backup. 3 weeks had passed since her midnight reconciliation with Nicholas, and she was learning that facing the storm together was infinitely easier than weathering it alone. They'd developed a rhythm. Breakfast at his place, coffee dates at small cafes where the lighting was terrible, but the privacy was better. Quiet evenings at her apartment where they could pretend the outside world didn't exist. But tonight was different. Tonight they were going public in the most official way possible. Isabella stood in front of the full-length mirror in Nicholas's bedroom, adjusting the elegant navy blue dress he'd surprised her with that morning. It was perfect, sophisticated, but not flashy, beautiful but not attention-seeking. Like everything Nicholas chose, it struck exactly the right balance. "You look incredible," came his voice from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. Even after all these weeks together, he still took her breath away. The way the formal wear emphasized his broad shoulders, the way his gray eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. "I look terrified," Isabella corrected, smoothing her hands down the silky fabric of the dress. "You look terrified and incredible," Nicholas amended, crossing the room to stand behind her. His hands settled on her shoulders, warm and reassuring. "Which is exactly how I feel." Isabella met his eyes in the mirror. The great Nicholas Hayes is nervous about a charity gala. The great Nicholas Hayes is nervous about bringing the woman he loves to her first major public event as his girlfriend, he corrected softly. There's a difference. Tonight was the Children's Hospital Foundation Gala, one of the biggest charity events of the LA social calendar. Nicholas served on the board, which meant they couldn't avoid it, and they'd decided together that hiding wasn't sustainable. If they were going to build a life together, they needed to start living it publicly. What if I say the wrong thing? Isabella asked, her hands fluttering nervously. What if someone asks about our relationship and I freeze up? What if... Nicholas turned her in his arms, cutting off her spiraling thoughts with a gentle kiss. Then I'll step in. We're a team, remember? You don't have to face any of this alone. Isabella took a deep breath, drawing strength from his calm confidence. What's the worst that could happen? Honestly? Nicholas's mouth quirked up in a small smile. Someone could ask you about your intentions regarding my money. Photographers could follow us into the bathroom, and we could end up on the cover of 3 different magazines by morning. That's supposed to make me feel better? That's supposed to remind you that we've already survived worse, Nicholas said, his expression growing serious. And we came out stronger. Whatever tonight brings, we can handle it. Isabella nodded, feeling some of her tension ease. He was right. They had survived worse. The initial media frenzy, her career concerns, the week of separation, they'd weathered all of it and emerged more committed than ever. Besides, Nicholas added with a grin, I have insider information that the salmon is supposed to be exceptional tonight. Isabella laughed despite her nerves. You know the way to my heart is through event planning details. I know the way to your heart is through showing you that I pay attention to the things that matter to you, Nicholas corrected, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Ready? Ready, Isabella said, and was surprised to find she actually meant it. The Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom was even more spectacular than Isabella had imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white silk. Elaborate floral arrangements created islands of color throughout the space, and the city's elite mingled in their finest attire. Isabella had organized events like this, but experiencing one as a guest, especially as Nicholas Hayes's guest, was entirely different. Mr. Hayes! A distinguished older woman in emerald green approached them almost immediately. How wonderful to see you. And this must be the famous Isabella we've been reading about. Isabella felt Nicholas's hand tighten slightly on her lower back, a gesture of support rather than possession. Eleanor Whitman, I'd like you to meet Isabella Reed, Nicholas said smoothly. Isabella, Eleanor is one of the hospital's most generous donors and the woman who single-handedly convinced me to join the board. Oh, I did no such thing. Eleanor waved dismissively, but her eyes were kind as they focused on Isabella. You must be exhausted by all the media attention, dear. How are you holding up? Isabella was surprised by the genuine concern in the woman's voice. She'd expected judgment, criticism, invasive questions. Instead, she found herself facing motherly worry. I'm learning, Isabella said honestly. It's been an adjustment, but I have good support. Eleanor's gaze flicked to Nicholas, and something approving passed over her features. Yes, I imagine you do. Nicholas, you did well with this one. She has kind eyes. As Eleanor moved on to greet other guests, Isabella felt some of her tension melt away. That wasn't so bad, she murmured to Nicholas. Eleanor's one of the good ones, he replied. She's more interested in your character than your bank account or your publicity value. The evening progressed more smoothly than Isabella had dared hope. Yes, there were photographers, but they kept a respectful distance. Yes, there were curious glances and whispered conversations, but there were also genuine smiles and warm introductions. Nicholas never left her side, but he didn't hover either. He included her in conversations naturally, introduced her with pride, and made it clear that she belonged there because he wanted her there. During the dinner, Isabella found herself seated between Nicholas and Dr. Sarah Chen. Wait, she caught herself. Dr. Sarah Liu, the hospital's chief pediatric surgeon. The woman was brilliant and funny, and she drew Isabella into a conversation about event planning that made the evening feel less like a test and more like a dinner party. You know, Dr. Liu said as dessert was being served, we've been looking for someone to help us revamp our annual fundraising events. Someone with fresh ideas who understands both the business side and the heart of what we're trying to accomplish. Isabella felt her pulse quicken. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. Would you be interested in discussing it? I know your schedule must be packed, but I'd love to discuss it, Isabella said quickly, then caught herself. I mean, I'd need to know more details, but yes, I'm very interested. After Dr. Liu walked away to mingle with other guests, Nicholas leaned close to Isabella's ear. See? Good things happen when you let the world see how amazing you are. Isabella smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I can't believe she offered me a job. I can, Nicholas said simply. You're brilliant at what you do. The only difference is that now people in my circle are getting to see it. As the evening wound down, they found themselves on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the twinkling lights of Beverly Hills. The October air was cool and crisp, and Isabella could smell jasmine from the gardens below. How do you feel? Nicholas asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. Surprised, Isabella admitted. I expected it to be worse, more invasive, more judgmental. Don't get me wrong, Nicholas said carefully. Tonight was relatively tame because this crowd has known me for years. They're protective of people they consider family, but it won't always be this easy. Isabella nodded, understanding the warning but not feeling defeated by it. I know, but Nicholas, for the first time, I feel like I can handle whatever comes next. Because you're getting stronger? Because I'm not facing it alone, Isabella corrected, turning in his arms to look at him directly. Because I have you, and we have this, and that makes me feel invincible. Nicholas's smile was soft and full of love. We are pretty formidable together. We are, Isabella agreed, going up on her toes to kiss him softly. And you know what? I'm actually looking forward to our taco date tomorrow night even more than I enjoyed tonight. Nicholas laughed. Plastic chairs and terrible lighting. Plastic chairs and terrible lighting, Isabella confirmed. Just you and me and the best tacos in L.A. It's a date, Nicholas said, pulling her closer. All of our dates, from the fancy ones to the ridiculous ones. As they swayed together on the terrace, the sounds of the party fading behind them, Isabella realized something important. She'd spent so much time worrying about the price of loving Nicholas that she'd almost missed the value of it. Tonight had shown her that their love wasn't just strong enough to survive his world. It was transformative enough to make that world better. And tomorrow, they'd prove that it was also simple enough to thrive over terrible tacos and plastic chairs. Some battles, Isabella was learning, were won not by fighting harder, but by loving better. And she and Nicholas were getting very good at loving better. Some conversations changed the trajectory of everything, and this was one of them. Isabella stood in the kitchen of her apartment, humming softly as she prepared dinner for Nicholas's return from his business trip to San Francisco. 3 months had passed since the charity gala, and their rhythm had become as natural as breathing. Work days filled with supportive texts, evenings spent cooking together or exploring hole-in-the-wall restaurants, weekends that blended his world and hers in ways that surprised them both. The media attention had settled into a manageable background hum. Photographers still followed them occasionally, but the stories had shifted from speculation to simple documentation of their relationship. More importantly, Isabella's work had flourished. The children's hospital contract had led to 3 more major clients, all drawn to her discretion and professionalism in handling high-profile events. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Landing in 20 minutes, can't wait to see you." "N," Isabella smiled, stirring the pasta sauce she'd been perfecting all afternoon. Nicholas had been gone for 4 days, longer than they'd been apart since their reconciliation, and she'd been surprised by how much she missed him. Not just his presence, but the way he fit into her daily life, the way everything felt more complete when he was there. She was setting the table when she heard his key in the lock. The sound still gave her a little thrill, the domesticity of it, the way he belonged in her space now as much as she belonged in his. "Something smells incredible," came his voice from the hallway. "That would be my famous—" Isabella started to call back, but the words died in her throat when Nicholas appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked tired from travel, his usually perfect hair slightly mussed, his shirt wrinkled from the flight. But there was something else in his expression, something intense and determined that made her pulse quicken. "Hey," she said softly, moving toward him. "How was San Francisco?" Instead of answering, Nicholas dropped his travel bag and crossed the room in 3 quick strides, gathering her in his arms and kissing her with an urgency that spoke of 4 days' worth of missing her. Isabella melted into him, tasting relief and longing and something deeper in the way his mouth moved against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. "I have something to tell you," he said quietly. Isabella's heart stuttered. "Good something or bad something? Life-changing something," Nicholas replied, his grey eyes searching her face. "Can we sit down?" They settled on her small couch, Nicholas's hands finding hers immediately. The intensity in his expression was making her nervous, but there was also something hopeful there that kept her from spiraling into worry. "I've been thinking a lot during this trip," Nicholas began, "about us, about what we've built together, about what I want our future to look like." Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. "When I first told you I loved you, I was thinking about taking a risk, about finally being brave enough to reach for what I wanted. But these past few months being with you, building this life together, it's not about risk anymore, Isa. It's about certainty." Nicholas shifted on the couch, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. "I'm certain that I want to wake up next to you every morning. I'm certain that I want to support your dreams and share mine with you. I'm certain that whatever challenges come our way, I want to face them with you by my side." Isabella's breath caught as she began to understand where this conversation was heading. "I know we haven't talked about timelines or specific plans," Nicholas continued, his voice growing softer but more intense. "But I also know that I don't want to spend another day wondering about our future when I'm already sure about what I want it to be." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Isabella's heart stopped completely. "Isabella Reed," Nicholas said, opening the box to reveal a stunning but elegant diamond ring, exactly the style she would have chosen if she'd ever let herself dream that far. "Will you marry me?" The world seemed to tilt around her. She stared at the ring, at his face, at the hope and love and vulnerability written in every line of his expression. "Nicholas," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I know it might seem fast," he said quickly, misreading her shock, "but we've known each other for 10 years. We've been through everything together. The friendship, the fear, the media circus, the separation. We've seen each other at our worst and loved each other anyway, and I don't want to wait anymore to start forever with you." Isabella looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd been her anchor through every storm, who'd fought for their love when she'd been too scared to fight for it herself, who'd somehow managed to become not just her partner, but her home. "You want to marry me," she said, as if testing the words. "I want to marry you," Nicholas confirmed. "I want to build a life with you. I want to support your career and share adventures and maybe someday have a family together. I want all of it, Isa. All the mundane Tuesday mornings and the glamorous Saturday nights and everything in between." Isabella felt tears spilling down her cheeks as the magnitude of what he was offering hit her. This wasn't just a proposal, it was a promise of partnership, of shared dreams, of a love strong enough to weather anything. "What about your family?" she asked, her practical side asserting itself even in this moment. "What about the media? What about the fact that I love you more than I care about anyone else's opinion?" Nicholas interrupted gently. "Isa, my family is going to love you because I love you. The media is going to write whatever they want regardless, but none of that matters compared to what we have." He cupped her face in his free hand, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I'm not asking you to marry my money, or my status, or my complications. I'm asking you to marry me. The man who burns toast and gets grumpy when he's hungry and loves you so much it scares him sometimes." Isabella laughed through her tears, remembering all the ordinary moments that had made her fall in love with him. Not the billionaire, but the man who remembered how she liked her coffee and called her when he was having a bad day. "Yes," she whispered. Nicholas went very still. "Yes? Yes," Isabella said more firmly, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Yes, I want to marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it, the Tuesday mornings and the Saturday nights and whatever craziness comes with loving Nicholas Hayes." The smile that broke across Nicholas's face was blindingly bright. With shaking hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger, and Isabella marveled at how perfectly it fit, how right it looked there. "I love you," Nicholas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you so much, Issa." "I love you too," she replied, admiring the way the diamond caught the light. "Though I have to say your timing is terrible. The pasta is probably overcooked by now." Nicholas laughed, pulling her close. "I'll make you 1,000 pasta dinners to make up for it. Is that a promise, Mr. Hayes?" "That's a promise, future Mrs. Hayes," Nicholas said, and the sound of it made Isabella's heart soar. As they sat together on her couch, admiring her ring and talking about wedding plans and the future they were going to build together, Isabella realized something profound. She'd spent so much time worrying about the cost of loving Nicholas that she'd almost missed the greatest gift of all. Not just his love, but the chance to love him back completely, publicly, forever. And now, with a ring on her finger and forever stretching out before them, she was finally ready to stop being afraid of how much she loved him. She was ready to love him with everything she had for the rest of her life. But first, she was going to rescue that pasta, because even future Mrs. Nicholas Hayes had to eat. Some things, thankfully, never changed. Today was the day she would become Isabella Hayes, and she had never been more certain of anything. 6 months had passed since Nicholas's proposal, and now Isabella stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite of the Beverly Hills Hotel, surrounded by the soft rustle of ivory silk and the gentle chaos of wedding day preparations. Her dress was a masterpiece of understated elegance, flowing lines that celebrated her curves, delicate lace details that caught the afternoon light, and a train that whispered against the marble floor like a promise. "You look like a dream," Mia said softly, stepping back to admire her handiwork with Isabella's hair. She'd woven tiny white roses through the elaborate updo, creating a crown of flowers that made Isabella feel like something from a fairy tale. "I feel like I'm about to throw up," Isabella admitted, pressing a hand to her stomach. "Is that normal?" "Completely normal," Dr. Angela Reed assured her daughter, adjusting the delicate pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's. "I was so nervous on my wedding day that your father had to hold my hands to stop them from shaking during the vows." Isabella smiled at the memory of her parents' love story, 30 years of marriage that had weathered job changes, financial struggles, and the everyday challenges of building a life together. She wanted that with Nicholas. Not just the romance, but the partnership, the friendship, the quiet strength that came from choosing each other every day. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Mia called. To Isabella's surprise, Eleanor Whitman entered, looking regal in deep purple silk. The older woman had become an unexpected mentor over the past months, taking Isabella under her wing in the sometimes complicated world of Los Angeles high society. "My dear," Eleanor said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "you look absolutely radiant." "Thank you," Isabella said, feeling some of her nervousness ease in the presence of the woman's calm energy. "I can't believe this is really happening." "Can't you?" Eleanor moved closer, her expression knowing. "Isabella, I've watched that boy, man, for 15 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not with infatuation or attraction, but with pure, uncomplicated love." Isabella felt tears threaten and quickly blinked them back. Mia would kill her if she ruined her makeup now. "He told me something interesting yesterday," Eleanor continued. "He said that marrying you isn't about completing himself, it's about becoming the best version of who he already is. That's the kind of love that lasts, dear. The kind that makes both people better." Before Isabella could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Claire, Nicholas's assistant, looking slightly frazzled but smiling. "It's time," she announced. "The groom is pacing so much I'm worried he's going to wear a hole in the marble floor." Isabella's heart skipped. "He's nervous too." Nervous, excited, and apparently questioning whether his tie is straight for the 15th time, Claire reported with a grin. "I've never seen him like this. It's actually quite sweet." As the women began to gather their things, bouquets, final touch-ups, last-minute reassurances, Isabella caught sight of herself in the mirror one more time. The woman looking back at her was confident, radiant and ready. Not perfect, but perfectly herself. The walk down the aisle felt like floating through a dream. The ballroom had been transformed into a garden paradise, with white roses and soft lighting, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and intimate. 200 guests rose to their feet as the music swelled, but Isabella only had eyes for one person. Nicholas stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair catching the light, his grey eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He looked nervous and sure and completely overwhelmed, and when their eyes met, his face broke into a smile so pure and joyful that Isabella felt her own nervous energy transform into bubbling happiness. He was beautiful, he was hers, and in 3 minutes they would be married. The ceremony passed in a blur of meaningful words and shared glances. They'd written their own vows, and when Nicholas spoke about friendship becoming love, about choosing each other through every challenge, about building a life based on respect and laughter and unwavering support, Isabella felt like her heart might burst from the truth of it. When it was her turn, she looked into his eyes and spoke from the deepest part of her soul. 10 years ago, you became my best friend. 6 months ago, you became my greatest love. Today, you become my partner in everything. I promise to choose you, to support you, to laugh with you, and to love you through every adventure that's waiting for us. The moment the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nicholas's hands framed her face with infinite tenderness, and he kissed her with a sweetness that spoke of promises kept and dreams fulfilled. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Isabella heard only the sound of her own heart beating in perfect rhythm with his. The reception was a celebration of not just their love, but the community that had supported them through everything. Isabella's colleagues from the event planning world mingled with Nicholas's business associates. Her college friends shared stories with his family members. The media was kept at a respectful distance, and for once the focus was entirely on joy rather than scrutiny. During their first dance, swaying to a song they'd chosen because it reminded them of that night at Griffith Observatory when they'd first confessed their love, Nicholas whispered in her ear, "How does it feel to be Mrs. Hayes?" "Like coming home," Isabella whispered back, meaning every word. Later, as the evening wound down and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Tuscany, Isabella found herself standing on the hotel's terrace once again, the same place where she'd first felt brave enough to face the world as Nicholas's girlfriend. Now she was his wife, and the world felt infinite with possibility. "Any regrets?" Nicholas asked, joining her at the railing, his bow tie undone and his jacket slung over his shoulder. "Only one," Isabella said, turning to face him. Nicholas's expression grew concerned. "What?" "I regret that we waited so long to stop being scared," Isabella said, reaching up to smooth his rumpled hair. "Think of all the time we wasted pretending we were just friends." Nicholas's smile was soft and filled with understanding. "We weren't wasting time, Mrs. Hayes. We were building a foundation strong enough to support forever." Isabella considered this, thinking about all the years of friendship, all the support through challenges, all the laughter and trust and deep knowledge of each other that had made their romantic love not just possible, but inevitable. "You're right," she said finally. "We were exactly where we needed to be, when we needed to be there. And now?" Isabella looked at her husband, this man who had been her anchor, her safe harbor, her greatest adventure, the man who had loved her patiently and completely, who had fought for their relationship when she'd been too scared to fight, who had proven that love could be both practical and magical. "Now we're exactly where we're supposed to be," she said simply. Nicholas kissed her then, soft and sure and full of promises for all the tomorrows stretching out ahead of them. As the lights of Los Angeles sparkled below and the stars wheeled overhead, Isabella realized that this wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of everything, and she couldn't wait to discover what forever looked like with Nicholas Hayes by her side. Some love stories, she'd learned, weren't about finding the perfect person. They were about finding the right person and choosing to build something perfect together. She and Nicholas had found each other in friendship, discovered love in vulnerability, and committed to forever in joy. Everything else was just details, beautiful, complicated, wonderful details that they would navigate together, one day at a time, for the rest of their lives. Mrs. Isabella Hayes had a nice ring to it, she thought, but more importantly, it had a beautiful future attached to it. 5 years later, some stories never really end. They just keep getting better. Isabella Hayes stood in the kitchen of their Malibu home, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she watched her husband chase their 3-year-old daughter, Sophia, around the backyard. The little girl's laughter carried on the ocean breeze, a sound that never failed to make Isabella's heart soar. Sophia had Nicholas's grey eyes and Isabella's adventurous spirit, and she ruled their household with the benevolent tyranny that only toddlers could master. "Daddy, catch me!" Sophia shrieked with delight, her dark curls bouncing as she ran toward the sandbox Nicholas had built for her last summer. "I'm coming for you, little monster," Nicholas called back, his voice filled with the kind of joy that had replaced the controlled composure Isabella had once known. Fatherhood had softened him in the most beautiful ways, revealing depths of playfulness and tenderness she was still discovering. Isabella smiled as she finished packing the picnic basket for their afternoon at the park, a Saturday tradition they'd maintained even as their lives had grown busier and more complex. Her event planning company had expanded beyond her wildest dreams, now employing 12 people and handling some of the most prestigious events on the West Coast. Nicholas's hotel empire had grown too, but he'd learned to delegate more, to prioritize the quiet moments that made success meaningful. "Mommy!" Sophia burst through the sliding glass door, her chubby arms reaching up to be lifted. "Daddy says we're going to the park with the swings." "That's right, sweetheart," Isabella said, scooping up her daughter and inhaling that unique scent of sunshine and innocence that seemed to cling to children. "Are you excited?" "So excited," Sophia declared, clapping her hands. "Can we get ice cream?" "We'll see," Isabella said, the universal parent response that meant probably yes, but I want you to eat your lunch first. Nicholas appeared in the doorway, grass stains on his white t-shirt and dirt smudged on his cheek. He looked nothing like the billionaire hotel mogul the world knew, and everything like the man Isabella had fallen in love with, rumpled, happy, and completely devoted to his family. "Ready for our adventure?" he asked, stealing a quick kiss from Isabella before tickling Sophia until she dissolved into giggles. "Always," Isabella replied, and meant it. The drive to Griffith Park was filled with Sophia's chatter about the ducks she wanted to feed and the slides she planned to conquer. Isabella and Nicholas exchanged glances in the rearview mirror, communicating in the wordless language they'd developed over 7 years of marriage, the kind of partnership that made parenting feel less like work and more like the world's most rewarding collaboration. At the park, they spread their blanket under the same oak tree where they'd had their first picnic as a married couple. Sophia immediately ran toward the playground, and Nicholas followed at a careful distance, ready to catch her if she fell, but giving her the independence to explore. Isabella watched them, her heart full to overflowing. This life they'd built, messy and beautiful and completely their own, still sometimes felt too good to be true. The media attention had faded to occasional mentions in society pages, replaced by more current scandals and romances. They'd learned to live with the scrutiny without letting it define them, protecting their family's privacy, while still engaging with the causes and communities that mattered to them. "Mommy, come push me," Sophia called from the swings, and Isabella jogged over to fulfill her daughter's request. As she pushed the swing higher, listening to Sophia's delighted squeals, Isabella caught sight of a young couple sitting on a nearby bench. They were clearly in the early stages of love, holding hands, stealing kisses, looking at each other like they'd discovered something miraculous. The woman was laughing at something the man had whispered in her ear, and there was something about their joy that reminded Isabella of herself and Nicholas all those years ago. "Remember when that was us?" Nicholas said softly, appearing beside her as Sophia jumped from the swing to run toward the slide. "We were never that young," Isabella teased, but she knew what he meant. There was something beautiful about new love, about the way it made everything feel possible and bright. "No," Nicholas agreed, his arm sliding around her waist. "We were better. We were friends first." Isabella leaned into his warmth, watching Sophia navigate the playground with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never doubted she was loved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd figured it out sooner? If we'd been brave enough to admit how we felt back in college?" Nicholas was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes. But then I think about everything we went through to get here, the friendship, the fear, the separation, the media circus, all of it, and I realize that we needed all of those experiences to become the people who could build this." He gestured toward Sophia, toward the life they'd created together. "We needed to be ready for this kind of love, the kind that lasts." Isabella nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Their love had been tested by external pressures and internal doubts, strengthened by challenges and sweetened by time. It wasn't the desperate passion of early romance anymore. It was something deeper, more resilient, more real. "Mama, Daddy, watch this," Sophia called from the top of the climbing structure, preparing to attempt a feat that looked terrifying to her parents, but routine to her fearless 3-year-old logic. They watched together, hearts in their throats, as their daughter successfully navigated her small adventure. When she reached the bottom safely, she ran to them with arms outstretched, confident in the knowledge that they would always be there to catch her. As the afternoon wound down and they packed up their picnic supplies, Isabella found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From best friends to lovers to spouses to parents, each phase had built on the last, creating something stronger and more beautiful than she could have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Nicholas asked as they walked back to the car, Sophia sleepy in his arms. "Forever," Isabella said simply. "How it's not a destination, it's a choice. And how grateful I am that I get to keep choosing you." Nicholas stopped walking and turned to face her, his grey eyes soft with the kind of love that had only deepened with time. "Even with the grass stains and the 5 a.m. wake-up calls and my terrible dad jokes." "Especially with the grass stains and the 5 a.m. wake-up calls and your terrible dad jokes," Isabella confirmed, going up on her toes to kiss him softly. As they drove home through the golden light of late afternoon, Sophia falling asleep in her car seat and their hands intertwined across the center console, Isabella realized that this was what happiness looked like, not a perfect moment, but a perfect accumulation of imperfect moments that somehow added up to a life worth living. They'd started as friends who were afraid to risk what they had for what they might have. They'd become lovers who had to learn that love required courage as much as feeling. They'd evolved into partners who understood that marriage was a daily choice to keep choosing each other. And now they were a family, building something that would last beyond their own forever. That night, after Sophia was tucked into bed and the dishes were done, Isabella and Nicholas sat on their deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm, and the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. "Do you think she'll have an easier time with love than we did?" Isabella asked, thinking about their daughter's future. "I hope so," Nicholas said, pulling Isabella closer. "But I also hope she understands that the best things in life are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth being brave enough to reach for, even when you're scared." Isabella smiled, thinking about the scared woman she'd been 5 years ago, terrified of what loving Nicholas might cost her. She'd had no way of knowing then that love didn't take, it gave. It gave purpose and strength and joy beyond anything she'd thought possible. "She'll understand," Isabella said with quiet confidence, "because she'll have an example of what real love looks like." "Yeah?" Nicholas's voice was soft with emotion. "What does real love look like?" Isabella looked at her husband, this man who'd been her best friend, her greatest love, her partner in everything, the father of her child, her anchor in every storm. This man who still made her coffee exactly the way she liked it, who still remembered every important date, who still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, even when she was covered in finger paint and exhaustion. "It looks like this," she said simply. "It looks like choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. It looks like building something together that's stronger than what either of us could create alone. It looks like forever that starts fresh every morning." Nicholas kissed her then, soft and sure and full of 5 years' worth of shared memories and infinite tomorrows yet to be written. And as the waves continued their ancient song below, and their daughter slept peacefully in the house they'd built with love, Isabella knew with absolute certainty that she'd found exactly what she'd been looking for without even knowing she was searching. She'd found her home, her partner, her forever. She'd found the love story she was meant to live, a message from the heart. Isabella and Nicholas's journey reminds us that the greatest love stories aren't always the easiest ones. Sometimes love asks us to be braver than we think we can be, to risk more than feels comfortable, and to choose each other again and again, especially when the world makes it difficult. Their story teaches us that true love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for, someone who makes you want to become the best version of yourself, someone who feels like home even in the middle of a storm. From friendship to romance, from private moments to public scrutiny, from fear to courage, from I love you to I do to forever, Isabella and Nicholas showed us that real love grows stronger through challenges, not in spite of them. Now it's your turn to share. What moment in their story touched your heart the most? Was it Nicholas's public declaration of love, Isabella's brave return that midnight, their first confession at Griffith Observatory, or perhaps their quiet family moments 5 years later? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.